Speaker, fellow South Africans. Mr. President, thank you very much for sharing with us the story of Tintswalo, the child of democracy. There is no doubt that the South Africa that she grew up in after 1994 was a hopeful place. It was built on the South African dream, the promise that her life would be better than the life of her parents and that her children's lives would be better still. What the President did during his address was to tell us the story of Tintswalo's start in life during the 1990s and 2000s. It was far from perfect, but it was a time of hope and possibility. But Tintswalo's life story does not end after childhood. Today, she is a 30-year-old woman. She has entered the next phase of her life as a wife, a mother, and a provider. Over the past decade, she has watched in growing horror as the dream of her childhood has been betrayed. Tintswalo's social consciousness started to develop during high school as she watched the ANC elevate a man accused of corruption and rape to the highest office in the land. She grew steadily more disillusioned when she found out that 246 million rand of public money was used to build a fire pool and a chicken coop at the President's home in Nkandla, even as many people around her fell deeper and deeper into poverty. And she watched as the ANC members of this House protected him. In 2015, she graduated from a TVET college. A year later, Tintswalo realized that she was not alone in her growing unease about the future. In 2016, she watched as many voters abandoned the ANCs in major cities. And she too started to think about changing her vote at the next election. You see, she just couldn't stomach the idea of voting for the ANC after it had unleashed Jacob Zuma, state capture, and load shedding on her country. But in 2018, her spirit lifted. Tintswalo was delighted when the ANC ejected Zuma from the presidency in February of that year. In fact, Mr. President, in 2019, Tintswalo voted for you. Like many others across the country, she did so for one reason, because she believed that you, Mr. President, would restore South Africa to the path it was on when she was a child. That you would rescue the South African dream. But tragically, her hopes were shattered soon after. In the same year that Mr. Ramaphosa was elected, Tintswalo lost the first and only job she had because the load-shedding crisis that he had promised to end shut down the factory where she worked. She was forced to move into a tin shack on the outskirts of the city, returning to the same life of poverty she thought she had left behind for good. And she has been unemployed ever since. In 2021, Tintswalo joined the growing group of South Africans who simply refused to vote. She was simply too angry after the Ramaphosa administration broke all of the lofty promises it had made in the New Dawn, including by protecting the President's comrades implicated in state capture. And sadly, things went from bad to much, much worse. In 2022, her father became one of the 75 people who are murdered every single day in South Africa. He was killed by a loan shark from whom he was forced to borrow money because the Transnet failure had shut down the transport job he had had since Tintswalo was a baby. For Tintswalo, it felt like her whole world had come crashing down. She'd lost her livelihood, she'd lost her home and her father. Her South African dream lay in ruins. Yet amid the darkest hour of her life, light entered when she gave birth to a daughter of her own. Called Isona, she was Tintswalo's greatest gift. This miracle of new life gave her a newfound determination to fight, to rescue her South African dream. You see, Tintswalo is done waiting for the ANC to change. She has accepted that it never, ever will. She acknowledges the opportunities she got as a young person, which her parents never had. But she now thinks about the future of her own family above all else. You see, Mr. President, like millions of other South Africans, Tintswalo cannot afford to live in the past. She must survive in the reality of what South Africa is in 2024, not what it was in 1994. When she is reminded of her hopeful childhood, it fills her with sadness for the childhood that waits Isona. When she remembers how her family moved from a shack into a formal house with running water and electricity when she was a young girl, it hurts and shames her that she has ended up back in a shack with no water and constant power cuts as a grown woman. The memory of how excited she was at her graduation is completely turned to anger when she realizes that she has been unemployed for twice as long as it took her to complete her qualification. For the hard truth, Mr. President, is that when Tintswalo listened to the President on Thursday, it did not make her grateful, as he may have hoped. It made her sad and it made her angry. Because whether you like it or not, Mr. President, you have betrayed Tintswalo's South African dream. Hearing the President speak without acknowledging that the same people who once gave her the permission to dream are the same people who have now shattered those dreams. And this has only made Tintswalo more resolute than ever that the time for change has come. She knows that the only reason she had a better start in life than her parents did was because her parents stood up and fought for change when it was required. The South African dream she tasted as a child did not come about by accident, because dreams only come true when we fight to make them true. Tintswalo now knows that it is her turn to fight for change by removing the ANC from power, to rescue Isona from the nightmare that the ANC is condemning her to grow up in. And it's not only Tintswalo. In Eldorado Park, Auntie Fatima is ready to fight to rescue her South African dream so that her children may be free from gangsters and drug lords. In Citrus Dal, Farmer Johan is ready to fight to rescue his South African dream so that he can spare his children from the indignity of watching the fruits of their labor rot at the dockside of a failing port. In London, Sipho, the engineer, is ready to fight to rescue his South African dream so that his children can grow up in a country he had to leave in order to find opportunity, but which he still loves deeply. Watching the President stand at this podium and sing the praises of a country that no longer exists made all South Africans even more resolute than ever before that this is the year we must remove the ANC from power. When the ANC says that 2024 is the year that we must defend our freedom, they are right. We must defend our freedom. We must defend it from the ANC. Because the people of South Africa know that in 2024, the single biggest threat to our freedom and to the South African dream is the African National Congress. A labour market where 7 out of 10 young people cannot find work is an existential threat to our freedom. Load shedding and water shedding are existential threats to our freedom. Rampant crime is an existential threat to our freedom. Childhood malnutrition is an existential threat to our freedom. Corruption and state capture that literally steals food from the mouths of the poor is an existential threat to our freedom. A president who protects and shields his deputy president despite Zuma-level allegations is an existential threat to our freedom. So know this, every time the lights go out, every time the taps run dry, every time criminals attack us in our homes, every time a small business shuts down, every time a child dies of hunger, it reminds us all of the dream that we have lost. But I have news for the President and his party. The people of South Africa are determined to take our dream back. And this year, the people of South Africa will rescue the South African dream by using the most powerful weapon that they have, and that is their vote. Mr. President, you recently made a baseless and dangerous claim that mysterious foreign agents were wanting to bring about regime change in South Africa. Let me give you this assurance. What is coming your way in this election is not regime change by foreign actors. It is democratic change by the people of South Africa. Voting out a failing government is not a threat to democracy. Voting out a failing government is the greatest vindication of democracy. And it is the only way we can all rescue our South African dream. In 1994, the dream that we all believed in was that the lives of this generation would be better than our parents. But in 2024, the nightmare that confronts us is that the lives of our children could be far, far worse than our own. And I don't say that abstractly. I too am a father of 3 young daughters, and I too have great dreams for them. But like Tintswalo and millions of other citizens, I too am fearful about the future of my children, of your children, of our children in this country. And that is why South African people all across the country must now rise to the call of history in this election. No matter how old you are, over the past 30 years, we have all grown up as democracy's children. We have learned, sometimes painfully, that in democracy, it only really works when we use our votes to hold those in power accountable. In 2024, the people of South Africa will vote against those who've diverted South Africa from the promise of 1994 through their corruption, their greed, and their incompetence. And they will vote for those who can practically restore South Africa to this path of promise through a proven track record of delivery, of good governance, and an ability to fix what the ANC has broken. Last week, I announced the DA's blueprint to rescue South Africa. Within the first 100 days, as the anchor tenant of a new multi-party government, we will introduce the most comprehensive legislative reform agenda seen in a generation. We will rescue South Africa through concrete reforms and legislation, not hollow talk and empty promises, reform and legislation. And these reforms and legal challenges and legal changes will introduce within the first 100 days and will aim at the 5 following key priority areas. 1, fixing the institution of Parliament so we can restore it as an engine room of reform. Secondly, ending load shedding for all South Africans by embracing privatization in the private sector. 3, abolishing cadre deployment in favor of merit-based appointments and a capable state. 4, halving the rate of violent crime, including murder, attempted murder, and gender-based violence. And fifthly, growing the economy while creating jobs and protecting social grants. If you had any doubt that the DA was the party to defeat the ANC, you only need to look at the ruling of the Constitutional Court yesterday, which now compels the ANC to hand over the complete records of the Cadre Deployment Committee, dating back all the way to January 2013, when Mr. Ramaphosa became its chairman under Mr. Zuma. Now, the DA expects the ANC, in its newfound love for the rule of law, to abide by this ruling, to expose its dirty cadre secrets, and how Mr. Ramaphosa's committee laid the foundation for state capture and collapse that we have witnessed across the country. And let me be clear, if they try and subvert the rule of law, we will make sure that they are jailed for contempt of court in exactly the same way that Mr. Zuma was. So, mark your calendars. In just 4 days' time, we will find this president's fingerprints all over cadre deployment and state capture, the very thing he has spent the last 6 years telling us that he was against. My fellow South Africans, Tintswalo, Fatima, Johan, and Sipho all voted for different political parties over the years. All of them, just like us, had different lived experiences. But what we are all united on, here and now, is that things cannot go on the way that they are. And what we all agree is the urgent need to rescue South Africa, and it's the South African dream before it's too late. That is why, in 2024, for the very first time, Tintswalo, Fatima, Johan, and Sipho will vote for the same party, for the one party that has a proven track record of getting things done and a proven ability to rescue South Africa and restore the dream that they all share, and that party is the Democratic Alliance. They will not do so because they believe and share everything. They will do so because they agree about one thing. And that one thing is that without jobs, without electricity, without running water, without an end to cadre deployment, without an honest government that serves the people and not the politicians, without functioning schools and working hospitals, all of our children will be doomed to lives far worse than our own. For we are South Africans, and as South Africans, we are all in this together. So let's be honest with each other. This election is not about restoring the dream of 1994. It's about keeping the dream alive. And when you come down to it, there's only one real choice in this election. Either our great South African dream dies if the ANC comes back to power with radical coalition partners like the EFF and other destructive populists, or we rescue the South African dream through a new multi-party government with the DA at its heart. The truth is that there's only one way to rescue Tintswalo's dream. There's only one way to rescue our South African dream, and that is by drawing our crosses next to the DA. In this election, don't vote out of fear. In this election, if you want to rescue our South African dream, vote for the DA. I thank you.
Thank you.